So I'm going to ask Pat to speak at my funeral someday, because he's so nice, you know. Well, it's great to be with you. You're lucky to have Pat, actually. I think he's doing what he really wants to do, so hopefully you're all sucking as much, those of you that take his class are sucking as much out of him as you can. So let me talk to you a little bit about Children's Miracle Network hospitals and a little bit about some ideas maybe for you as you're thinking about finishing up school. I know you guys are close to the end here this semester, just a few days away, right? And so you might have your mind on some other things, but as you're thinking about what might help you in your career, I tried to put together some thoughts and some things that I think have helped me. And you know, take them for what they're worth. If you think they're good, use them. If you think they're garbage, then don't. So let me talk to you a little bit about Children's Miracle Network hospitals. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this idea of a career in nonprofit. So most people don't go to business school and think, I'm going to work for a nonprofit. Anybody here think that that's your A1 like priority? Good. There's always a couple altruistic, really great people, and then the rest of you all greedy, capitalist people, you know. But let me tell you, I didn't think that either. So I went to BYU, and I studied advertising, and I worked for the Daily Universe, the student paper over there, selling advertising, and I got recruited by the Houston Chronicle. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to work in advertising. You know, I wanted to, you know, be, well, at the time, for me, because I'm a little older than you, it was Darren Stevens from Bewitched. He was like the advertising guy. You know, today it might be Don Draper, the advertising guy, but hopefully without all of his issues, right? But I didn't know that I wanted to be in nonprofit, and I got into it actually by accident. And my wife is an attorney, and she got a job offer with a law firm in Salt Lake, so we moved from Texas. I quit my job, followed her for her job, and I didn't have a job. And so I just started looking for anything, and I was 25 years old, and I was filling out every resume, responding to every ad, and I was sending stuff in. I got this call from Children's Miracle Network hospitals to come in. And this was actually like before the internet, so I couldn't even look up what they did, you know, it wasn't really that easy. So I didn't even know really what Children's Miracle Network was all about. And I went and did the interview, they offered me the job, and I thought, this is great, I'll do this charity thing for 2 years, and then I'll move on and get a real job. And I've been there now, October was 20 years. So I've been there 20 years. And I want to share with you some things about it. So what Children's Miracle Network is we raise money for children's hospitals, as Pat said. How many here have either personally been to or know somebody who's been treated at a children's hospital, by raise of hands? A lot of you, right? The reality is children's hospitals impact more kids and families than any other cause in the United States or Canada, probably the world, but we just work in North America right now. And the 62 kids every minute across the country are admitted to a children's hospital. And 11 million kids will be treated by a children's hospital every year. So if you think about it, the population of the United States is about 300 million people. Kids might be maybe a third of that, right? So maybe 100 million people. So 1 in 10 kids is being helped by a children's hospital. And I want to share with you a little bit about what children's hospitals do. So I have this story about Jessica. So I'm going to show you Jessica's story. Oh, we need our sound. There we go.
I'm Jessica Meyer, and I'm 12 years old. I first started dancing when I was 2.5 for 3. I love to dance. It's a good way to get like energy out and express yourself. Some of the dance moves are like pliés, relevés, pirouettes, rond de jambes. Those are all so much fun. I remember this one time in Walmart, you know, like the little kiosks that take your blood pressure. They had an upgraded one where you can do your weight and eye exam. So when I did the eye exam, my left eye did a good job, but my right eye, when I would look through it, I couldn't see anything. It was just like blacked out. We went down to the doctors and he said to get an MRI. The doctors came up to us and said, you know, you have brain cancer and it's a germinoma and you're probably gonna have to do, you know, chemotherapy and radiation. It's scary because you have to stop everything that's going on in your life, dance, school, even like homework and stuff, it stopped. You didn't really have a normal life, whatever that was. When they told me, I was gonna have cancer, I didn't think that I wasn't gonna beat it. I just knew I was. That wasn't an option, I'm just gonna beat this no matter what. Chemotherapy is this really yucky drug that you have to take to get rid of the cancer. At my school, we did a hair-a-thon because my hair was like really long. Almost everybody at the school either cut their hair for the girls or the boys shaved their hair for me. Some of them even donated money to help me get through all the medical expenses. And by the time I had my second chemotherapy, I was completely bald. We had to shave my hair because it kept falling out. All my hair, I was completely bald, all my eyebrows, all my eyelashes, some of the hair on my arms. Everything was gone except these little baby hairs lining my head. It's important for kids to have a children's hospital because there's all these little bingo games and little toys that always keeps you even extra happy and positive. I was treated at Monroe Carroll Junior Children's Hospital at Vanderbilt in Tennessee, which is one of the Children's Miracle Network hospitals. And the doctors and nurses there are amazing. They're very well trained in awesome fist bumps and really cool handshakes. On my last chemo, all the doctors were dancing along going, "Yay, last chemo!" Because of the support that you give to Children's Miracle Network hospitals, kids like me can get better. Put your money where the miracles are.
So we get to work with cool kids like Jessica, and we get to do some cool things. So when I got this job in nonprofit, I had no idea what it was going to be. I thought I was going to, I would go to these Christmas parties with my wife's law firm, and they would all say to me, they all thought I was a lawyer, because no lawyer would be married to anything less than another lawyer. And they all thought, but then when they found out I wasn't, and I would say, I work for Children's Miracle Network hospitals, they would say, so was there a lot of phone work in that? They thought that all I did all day long was call people and ask them for money. And maybe that's a little true, because we're always trying to figure out how do we raise money for these hospitals, but that's not really what it's all about. You get to do some interesting things, because when you're generating awareness, you do some cool things. So every year we have a program where we take kids like Jessica to the White House to raise awareness, so they get to meet President Obama or President Bush or President Clinton before him. And sometimes it's cool for us because we get to go along and get to meet sometimes and talk to them and work with them. But as I was thinking about what I would share with you today, I wanted to try to tell a little bit of my story, but also tell it in a way that gives you some things to think about. So I have 5 B's for success, things that you should think about being as you leave here and you embark on your career. So I'm going to share them with you, and I'm going to interweave some stories along with it. So the first one is be present. This is something that I had to learn. And actually, I'll tell you what, I only learned it maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But in today's world, we have a lot of distractions. We have our phones, we have our iPads, we feel like we should be doing all these things. There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of productivity pressure, and we think if we can do a bunch of things at one time, we're going to be better off. But what I'm telling you is you need to be present, be in the moment, be in the story, and work on being there. When you're somewhere, devote your attention to it, devote all your time to it. When you're in class, devote your time to it. Be present. I had a boss of mine say to me, you're coming to these meetings and you're spending a little time on your phone, checking your email. He says, and I get it, you're listening and all that, but you're sending the wrong message to the people around you. And then he also said, help people be present. So sometimes we can be not very engaging, not very interesting, And we should think about our storytelling skills in terms of be present, be involved in the story, whether you're listening to the story or you're telling the story, but be involved in the story. The next thing I would tell you is be curious. So a lot of times, there's so many things going on in the world, but be curious about why are things the way they are? Why do things work the way they do? Why do they have to be that way? Ask yourself some questions like, this is a favorite question of our innovation team, how might we? So a lot of times you say, why do we do something, or we have this problem. If you start those discussions with the question of, how might we? So we ask questions like, how might we raise 4 times as much money as we're raising? Or how might we improve this? Or how might we do that? Or how might we not have all this red tape in our organization? Things like how might we, or what if, or honestly just why. Just ask some questions about why. So I'll give you an example in my life. So I'm responsible for the Children's Miracle Network brand, and we know through research that brand awareness and affinity will actually help us raise more money. The stronger the brand is, the greater the affinity, the more money we'll raise. So we did research. We've been doing brand research for 15 years. And about 5 years ago, we started noticing something, and we started asking this question about, why don't we raise as much money as we should? And we looked at the brand research, and we found out, what? Most Americans aren't really sure that children's hospitals need money. We started asking, well, why would this be? They treat all these kids. Everybody knows about children's hospitals. They have really strong brands. And we started asking these questions, and we started looking at why that might be. And so I was really curious about it, right? We saw we have this big group of people who don't know. Like, they're just like unsure. Well, I don't really know, right? And what we found is it's the way children's hospitals market themselves. So we started looking at the advertising and the messaging that children's hospitals do from a branding perspective, and we found some interesting stuff. I'm going to show you a spot here from Mott Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So it's a great spot, shows what the hospital does, but it did not ask or have any need messaging in it. In fact, the end it says, from the leaders and the best. And so if children's hospitals are the very best, what do they need? They need nothing, right? And so what's happened is the marketers and the branding and the advertising people at children's hospitals have effectively told the American public, we don't need money. But yet they're saying, we need donations in order to do what children's hospitals do to fulfill our mission. An interesting thing is we looked in Canada and we found that almost half of Canadians do believe children's hospitals need money. And there's a whole different health system in Canada and that might play into it, but the real reason is children's hospitals in Canada, their message looks a lot different. So I'm going to show you one here from BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver. So in Canada, the hospitals talk about their need. And as a result, it's children's hospitals are the #1 cause in Canada. And they raise more money per person across Canada than children's hospitals raise per person in the United States. And so that's all came from asking the questions why. And we were doing this brand research, and we were all worried about the Children's Miracle Network brand, and we were worried about our brand, and we kind of didn't care too much about everything else. And somebody on my team said, well, why is this? Why is Canada have these numbers stronger than ours? And I always kind of glossed over that and just said, well, it's Canada and they're nicer or whatever. But when we started digging into it, we said it's all about positioning. And we made a big shift in our organization where we're not so focused on our brand, we're actually focused on children's hospitals as a category, or every local children's hospital, and we want those hospitals to be the cause. And so we're really changing how we do things. The other thing that I would tell you is be fearless. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, don't be afraid to fail, don't be afraid to try something new, don't be afraid to take risk. A few years ago, as Pat said, we created an innovation team that we call Cause Innovation. And basically we took 6 people that had really good, solid day jobs, and they had stuff they had to come to work every day and do. And we said to them, we're gonna put you in this innovation team, and you guys are gonna come up with new fundraising ideas. And to me, I thought, this is awesome, like, this is great. And they came to me and they said, how are we gonna do it? And I said, we're gonna do it like this. We're gonna get some really cool couches, and we're gonna put them in a room, and we're gonna sit around all day. We're just gonna come up with good ideas. Isn't that gonna be awesome? And they were all nervous. They're like, well, wait a second, like, I used to come to work and I had like these things I had to do today, and now you're gonna tell me I'm gonna come to work, I'm gonna sit on this couch, and I'm gonna just think up ideas? They're like, I don't know how that works. And they were really nervous about it, and I wasn't nervous at the beginning, but then they started coming to me, and they started saying to me, Craig, man, this isn't working. Like, we don't know what we're doing. We have no idea. We need somebody to teach us. And I said, I was supposed to be in charge, right? And I said, so I realized this was a time for me to be fearless and say, I don't know what we're doing either. And I said, so what should we do? And we all got together and we found somebody that did innovation thinking and process training, and we found out innovation is a lot more than just sitting on a couch trying to come up with ideas. There's actually a process. You actually do research and talk to people and test things and think about things. And so the team put together a whole process over our first year together to really come up with those ideas. And then we got Pat involved, and we dreamt up all these crazy ideas like, let's make our own brand, Miracle Harvest, and we'll sell it in the stores. And it was really interesting, it was a really interesting thing, and the team's still working on a lot of interesting ideas. And so it's really about, being fearless is about not being afraid to fail, not being afraid to take on new challenges. The next one I want to share is be persuasive. And I think sometimes the word persuasive gets a bad rap. When we think of persuasive, sometimes we think of like a used car sales guy that's really slick, and what can I do to get you into this car today? And as you leave on your careers, and some of you are going to be in sales or marketing, you're going to have this really strong desire that I just have to sell, I have to convince, and the reality is you need to persuade. And persuade is different than selling or convincing. It's more of a true way of selling. And when I persuade somebody to do something, that means that they have come to see my thinking, or we have agreed on what that's going to be. Persuading is not strong-arming, is not forcing, and is not commanding. Persuading is bringing somebody along, showing them the way, compromising with them, teaching them. And I thought of Martin Luther King, because if you think about his speeches were to persuade people. He never forced anybody. He never told them it had to be this way, but he persuaded people to see things his way. And I would say the same is a good skill for you. And so I want to show you, in this problem I had with marketing, I started thinking, okay, so here I got to go to these hospital chief marketing officers, and I'll tell you, chief marketing officers think like they're the smartest people in the world, maybe next to the chief finance officers, but they think they're so dang smart, and their egos get so wrapped up in what they work on. I had to go and I had to say to them, guess what, you guys? You're doing it wrong. You might be projecting this image of the best, and that might be helping you in terms of patients coming to the hospital, but you're killing your fundraising opportunities. And so I had to be persuasive with them. And so I had to go out and find people and case studies that could help me do that. And so I came across a TED Talk by a guy named Dan Pallotta. Maybe some of you have seen it, but he talks about why nonprofits are at a disadvantage. He basically says nonprofits don't get to play by the same rules as everybody else. And he has one section that talks about advertising and marketing. And so instead of me trying to make this case, I got Dan to help me persuade. And so the next thing I would tell you is be flexible. So sometimes we come out and we think our way is the best way. I've done that. I think my way is the best way. In fact, about 10 years ago, I remember calling my team in to a meeting, and I said to them, because I was having trouble with them all kind of getting along and kind of marching to the same beat, and I finally said to them, look, your job is not to do whatever you're doing. Your job is to do what I tell you. And guess how good that went over, right? Like, not good. But the reality is we need to be flexible. We need to be thinking about how do we work with other people. We need to think about how do we compromise. The world doesn't work by this kind of command structure anymore. What we really need to do is figure out how do we get everybody's minds working on problems, and how do we get them working on projects, and how do we gather all that information together, and how do we make compromises. So Pat mentioned in the intro that we're working on this cloud-based app. So we're working on this interesting app that we call InFlight, and what it is we have all these hospitals around the country, and they have to go out and meet with all of their locations that raise money, whether it's a Walmart or a Costco or a Marriott or a Dairy Queen or a Chico's or whatever it might be. And they have to be able to do that. And what they do before they do that is they do what any good person would do. They sit down and they plan. They say, okay, I'm gonna go visit all these stores. So I need to know, like, who do I need to talk to at store A? And how much did store B raise last year? And what did they do at store C? And so they spend a lot of time planning because that information isn't readily available to them. So my team came up with this idea of what if we had an app that had all that data in it, and they could show up in a store and the phone would tell them, you're in Walmart store 1234, and here's all the data you need for that store, and eliminate a lot of that planning. So we had this great idea, but guess what? It's like $2 million to create this project. And so I had to go to like my boss and say, hey, we have this really great idea, but we need $2 million for it. Well, his initial thought was, it's kind of been working the way it's been working, so we don't have $2 million, so we're not going to do it. So what happened is we had to ask a lot of questions about why. We had to be persuasive, but really what I had to be in the end was flexible, because the way I wanted to do it wasn't really the way everybody else thought it should be. And I tried for a few months to really stick to my guns. No, it has to be this way. It has to be this way. And finally I realized, do I want this to happen or do I want it to not happen? And so what I had to do is be flexible in how we approached the arrangement, how we approached the deal, and how we did things with the partner, with the developer, and also internally. And so I really had to be persuasive, and I had to be flexible. And I think that that's an important thing for you to remember. And I don't know that you learn it in college that well, because I don't know, maybe Pat's pretty flexible, but my experience was some professors aren't super flexible, right? You have to do it their way, you have to have their right answer, and all of those things. And so we're not exactly trained to be flexible, but what I would tell you is as you work in groups, as you get into your first jobs, really work on your ability to be flexible, see things from other people's perspective, and compromise. And then the last thing that I would share with you, and then we'll open it for questions, is really be patient. It's hard sometimes because you want things to happen so fast. And the world moves fast, and we think that we have to do things fast. But what I would tell you is be patient. I thought I'll be at Children's Miracle Network a couple years and I'll move on. And then I went back and got my MBA, and I thought, after I get my MBA, I'll move on. And what I learned in the process was patience in what I was doing really paid off for me. A job in nonprofit is not necessarily a job in poverty. It's not necessarily a job in overworked, hundreds of hours a week. It's not necessarily those things. It is hard work. It is challenging. You work by different rules than for-profits do. There are lots of things that are good, lots of things that are bad. But what I found is that by being patient and working in my career, things always seem to work out. I'll share just a personal story. So I report to our CEO, and since I've been there, we've had 3 CEOs. And every time they go to hire a new CEO, the last 2, they always talk to me too. So the board will always come and say, are you interested in the job? And I say, well, yeah, I'm interested in the job. And, and then for whatever reason, they decide, well, somebody outside is better, so we'll hire somebody from the outside. And the first time it happened, man, I was really ticked off. I was ready to quit. I should really should really quit and move on and go, somewhere where somebody values me, right? And then I realized, maybe I still have a lot to do here, and if I could be patient, I could learn from that person. And then he left, and a few years later, he left after a few years, and they decided to hire another CEO. And I thought, oh, you know what? This is my time, right? They passed me over once. The guy they hired didn't really work out that good, so maybe they've learned their lesson. And guess what? I hired another guy from the outside. And this time I was mad too. But I remembered learning from the first experience, maybe there's something I can learn from John, our new CEO. He's a good guy. I think I could learn some things from him. And so I decided, you know what I'll do? I'll be patient. And instead of just saying, hey, I'm out of here, I'm gonna go find the next best thing and move on, I decided to be patient. And the last 4 or 5 years that John's been with us have been amazing. And he's opened it up for me to do some really cool things, like this whole thing about our brand and asking why, that wouldn't have happened before. And I don't know if I was the CEO if we would have done that. So I learned some things that way. So I've decided, you know what, it doesn't matter. Be the CEO, don't be the CEO, it doesn't really matter. But be patient in what you're doing and things will work out. And in terms of our campaign or our brand, what we did this year was we launched a whole new campaign designed just to help people understand that children's hospitals need money. And we did some cool stuff. We went out and got a spokesperson, and I'll show you the spot, which is really the payoff for all of our work over a few years of being patient.
You see miracles all the time at our children's hospital. The first smile after surgery, a girl walking when they said she wouldn't, parents getting good news. But miracles never come easy. That's why, as great as children's hospitals are, they need our support to keep miracles happening. Put your money where the miracles are. Please join me in supporting Primary Children's Hospital.
So we took Jennifer Lopez and we created that campaign, and we did it for 170 different hospitals. So you saw the one for here in Utah, but wherever any of you might be from, Jennifer did a commercial or a spot or a campaign for them. And then we saw great work with it this year. We launched it back in May, and we actually saw a 10% increase in people's belief that children's hospitals are charities. And we saw millions of dollars in increased fundraising as that awareness went up across the country. So patience plays off. So that's what I would share with you today. Thank you for your time and being with me. And we have, I think, 8 or 10 minutes left, so I'll take any questions you might have. Yes?
What was your first position at CMN?
Oh, that's a good question. So they were looking for somebody to, a lot of the way we raise money is we go out and create partnerships with companies. And so they wanted somebody that could write sales proposals and make them look pretty. So I had sort of this advertising background, and I had enough graphic design experience to be dangerous, and so that's what they were looking for, and that's what I came in as. And it was a really low-level job, and it was fun though, because we would go sit in these meetings, and a bunch of people would sit around. They'd say, "Okay, we got a meeting with Coca-Cola in Atlanta next week. What should we take to them?" And they'd brainstorm all these ideas, and then they'd say, "All right, Craig, go put something together." And I would go, take all their ideas and put it together, and then somebody else would go out and try to sell it. So, and then from that, I just kind of moved different jobs. And the other thing I would tell you in being flexible is don't be afraid to take lateral moves. Like we always think it has to be this progression or this ladder up, and my experience is those ladders don't really exist anymore. So sometimes to go up, you have to go over. Sometimes you even have to go down in order to go up. A good question though. Yes?
Do you find that you compete with like the Gofundme, and have you thought of any marketing campaigns to compete with that?
Yeah, we compete with all of them if you want to think about it. We try in the charity space not to say we compete, but the reality is we do, right? Dan said 2% is what we get. And so the reality is if I want to raise more money, guess what? Somebody else is going to raise less. So we compete. We've worked on some ideas like Gofundme or Donors Choose. They do some really interesting things. It's really it's a new thinking for us because traditionally we haven't really worked with individual donors. We usually do it through a company like Walmart or through a radio station and a radiothon. And so we're working on some new ideas like that, but we don't have anything good yet. But good question. We failed on a few of them, had a couple blow up on us. We're doing one right now where you can donate $5 and get one of those bands like you saw Jennifer had at the end. So $5 a month and you band together for kids. We're trying that idea out right now. If you visit our site, you'll see it. Another question? No more questions? Yes?
So you kind of mentioned the difference between trying to get money out of the private sector. So obviously I can see you're trying to recruit money to come in, but what are your specific steps to try and get more money to charitable organizations?
Well, that's a good question. So she asked about what steps do you take to try to get more money? And the reality is some of it is competition, so you have to have a better story than the next charity. There's also a challenge in that not very many people wake up and say, who can I give money to today, right? Like you're not searching Amazon for what charity you could donate to. And so you have to really figure out how do you be top of mind. So from a branding, for any of you that are marketers, marketing in nonprofits is probably even more important in nonprofits than it is in for-profits because you have all these limitations, and so you have to be much more creative in order to cut through. So like part of the reason we went to get Jennifer Lopez as a spokesperson is we needed to be able to cut through. The creative part of me says celebrities like major cop-out, like anybody can do that. It's not very creative. But the reality is I needed hospitals to stand up and say, hey, we'll take your campaign and run it because it has something we can't do. And so we've been able to create that campaign and get hospitals to spend portions of their own budget to run the campaign, which we don't have enough money for. So those are kind of some of the things that we do. Yeah.
You mentioned that working in nonprofits doesn't mean you have to live in poverty. So what would you advise to students that want to go work in nonprofits but also want to make money?
Yeah, there's plenty of good paying jobs in nonprofit. But what I would tell you is if you want to work in nonprofit, the first thing to do is just get in. Sometimes you might say, so in my example, I took the job, and probably if I would have been like the sole provider for my family, what they offered me, I would have probably said, it's not enough, right? But I was in a position, my wife was working, wasn't really that big of a deal. I thought, I can do that for a while and see what happens. So what I would say the answer is just to get in. So you might have to get in, and you might have to, like any job, tough it out for a little while and then work your way on. But there are 500,000 nonprofit organizations in the country, and all of them need fundraising people, marketing people, program development people. They all need finance people. They all need that stuff. And so it's actually a great opportunity. The other thing is, if you want to stick around Utah, there aren't very many. So that's the other thing to think about. If you want to work in nonprofit, you might, there's Children's Miracle Network Hospital is probably the biggest, and then there's a few others, but you could work for a local nonprofit, or if you want to work for a national nonprofit, you might have to think about moving away for a while. Yeah.
If you're in a startup nonprofit, what is the best? What's the best way to get the name out there and get the recognition?
Yeah, that's a good question. Children's Miracle Network was a startup. A couple of guys started it because they had this idea that there should be a national telethon. And they actually didn't have the cause, they just wanted to do a telethon. They were like wannabe TV producers. And they went out and found hospitals to do it with. And they tell these great stories of the first few years where they would go to a city and say, go meet with the TV station and say, hey, we just met with the hospital. They really want to do this telethon. And do you want to do it? And they would say, well, if the hospital wants to do it, yeah, we'll do it. And then they would hurry and run across town and say, hey, we just were at the TV station and, they want to do this telethon. Do you want to do it? Well, if the TV station wants to do it, then we'll do it. But, I think the reality is now we have a lot more media options. So you have social media, you have, digital media that can be much more targeted. You have a lot of those things. A lot of more viral things, working with people, volunteers, all of those are good opportunities. So I actually think we have better opportunities than we used to. The problem is it's just more cluttered. There's lots and lots of nonprofits. Sometimes what I think is some small nonprofits should merge and work together. They don't do that. That's an interesting idea in nonprofit, is mergers. You don't see that happen. Yeah.
What has been the greatest method or technique in maintaining the relationships with those that do donate year after year?
The biggest thing is you got to show them the impact of their donation. So they want to know, like, they want to see stories like Jessica. They want to know they're helping kids like Jessica. They want to know what their dollars go to. Sometimes that's hard because we raise money in front of the hospital, and every hospital uses the money a little differently. Here in Salt Lake, for example, they use it all for charity care. So kids that can't afford it or don't have enough insurance, that's what they use it for. But other hospitals, they'll buy equipment with it, they'll fund research, they'll do education campaigns. So it's really hard to show that impact, but that's really what, so if I were to go back to your question, if I were starting up a nonprofit or I wanted to, the most important thing I would think about is showing people how their dollars or how their fundraising translates into impact. Yeah.
I was wondering, do you raise most of your money from public or from like big corporations?
We raise almost all of our money from the public. So this year we'll raise $270 million, and about $350 million of it will come $1 at a time. So you go to Costco and they ask you to buy a balloon. So Costco will raise $30 million in that campaign. Walmart will raise almost $80 million. So that's how we do it, $1 at a time. So you have a question, or?
Yeah, you mentioned you have presence in North America, so U.S. and Canada.
Right.
Are you looking to get presence in any other countries?
You know, we'd like to. We tried it a few years ago, and we did it wrong. We tried to do it in the UK and Ireland, and we totally blew up. And so we screwed up. We didn't know what we were doing, so we might do it again. But we don't have it on our radar screen at the moment, but we see it happening. So some of our fundraising campaigns, we have a video game fundraising program called Extra Life. It's like a marathon, but instead of running, you play video games for 24 hours. Not too bad, right? But we have people all over the world that want to do it, and we don't really have hospitals to give the money to. So we're trying to figure out how we might do it. So are we out of time?
We are, but let me ask you a question before anybody takes off. Can you guys hear me? Is that off?
There you go.
Test. So before you take off, let me ask you a quick question. Craig asked you how many people would like to be involved in nonprofit when we came. How many would like to be involved in nonprofit now?
Oh, good, some conversions.
They call that persuasion, right? They call that persuasion. One thing a quick note on a couple of things that Craig said. Interesting, when I came there, I met this guy named Tony. Okay, so Tony is one of the coolest guys ever. He's a born-again Christian, and he is passionate about his faith. But one of the things he said, and I was there, I thought, well, I'm here to give you all the knowledge you need about consumer packaged goods and how that works and the whole thing. But he sat me down and he says, I really appreciate your knowledge and your background and your relationships and all that's all, fine and good. But, excuse me, he said, do you believe in our cause? Because if you have all this knowledge and all this stuff, it's great. But if you don't believe in the cause, we really can't work together. And then I told him about my daughter, and I believe in the cause. The other thing I want to tell you is this patience thing. I had a reputation at Kraft Foods for being very engaging, as you might expect, right? Anybody that's spent time with me. But very fast-paced. And I had this boss, Chris Baldwin, who now runs this big company, CEO. And but he came in my office with this bag, and I'm like, what is this bag? So he came in, and he said, Milligan, sit down. I'm like, okay. So I sit down, and he pulls out this putting thing that would return your ball, right? And he hands me this really nice putter and 2 golf balls. He said, in the morning, I want you to come in and close that door, and I want you to putt for half an hour. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, I want you to putt, and I want you to think. I want you to think of better ways to do things. I want you to think about your family. I want you to think about anything other than the task that is in front of you right now. And I want you to learn patience. And I thought that was just some of the best advice I ever had. So there's so much that I took away from this presentation today. I want to thank Craig for being here. And I've got a little gift for him.
Oh, great.
To remember us by.
All right, thank you.